What's going on, people? This is Midnight Strike 3625 here to continue on the ACDC discography with none other than their second live effort, simply entitled Live. Most people, myself included, entitle it ACDC Live, but then again, it's a personal preference, so I digress. What sums up this album? It can be summed up in a lot of different ways. A mix, variety, adrenaline, heavy, and I don't know what else, basically. I mean, this basically encompasses what AC/DC were feeling, what the band was feeling as a whole, the energy level, and just everything that was going on at the time during the Razor's Edge period of time, basically, in 1990 through 1991, which this album was recorded. Now, the thing that I don't like, I'm just going to jump into it and say about this album, the thing that I don't like is the fact that it was recorded in many different locations. Now, unlike If You Want Blood, which was recorded in Glasgow, Scotland, for the entirety of it, this right here, ladies and gentlemen, was recorded in, I think, like 3 or 4 to 5 separate locations, if not more. And it doesn't really necessarily say in the album or in the linear notes or anywhere, really, where this album was officially recorded, where each song on the album was recorded. And I think this is a little bit of a downfall to this album, because it could have been so much more if they would have just used a single concert. They could have released it alongside Live in Donington. I mean, they could have called it Live in Donington, or Live at Donington, excuse me, if they would have actually released the concert to go along with it. So, if they would have actually, not dubbed their music, not, pick and choose which ones are perfect, which ones are better, and then combine them on an album, I think it would sound a little bit more cohesive, because really, when it comes down to it, the thing that made If You Want Blood, You Got It so good is A, the sound, A, the, B, the raw intensity of it all, and C, the cohesion. Everything on that album was from one single concert, and they just flowed right into each other, and you could barely tell. I mean, you can barely really tell on this album, but it's still very prevalent. I mean, the average listener isn't going to notice. But if you get into it, if you dig down deep into the roots of AC/DC, and you buy Live at Donington, say, and expect to hear this album, you're going to be sorely mistaken. All of the songs, with the exception of the ones that were recorded at Donington, of course, sound a little bit tweaked, a little bit different, as they are from a different concert. And that, to me, is a little bit of a letdown. I would have preferred a little bit more of a cohesive effort, especially, considering this is AC/DC, one of the biggest hard rock bands in the world. So, what is this album? Let's get into it. Let's talk about the songs, let's talk about the sound, and let's talk about the fact that this is drummer Chris Slade's last album in his tenure with the band, which lasted 2 albums, Razor's Edge and Live, AC/DC Live, if you will. So basically, when it comes down to it, there's 14 tracks, as I do not have the deluxe double disc edition with, I think there's like 20-some tracks, I forget. I don't really know, 28 maybe? I don't know if it's like double, but I only have the double, or the single edition of this. So 14 songs, all of which are very interesting, because this is the first live album with Brian Johnson on vocals. Yes, there have been live recordings, live rarities in the backtrack set that I have just obtained. I'll probably show it off a little bit later, but this is the first official studio album with Brian Johnson at the helm, and it sounds really interesting that they would choose this particular time to release it, because this is where AC/DC's frontman, legendary Brian Johnson, kind of hit his stride a little bit, kind of peaked. I mean, his voice was a lot better when they were in their so-called prime, which, in my opinion, was High Voltage through High Voltage through Flick of the Switch. So, between Back in Black and Flick of the Switch is where Brian Johnson's vocals were at their prime, at their peak. And on this, I mean, it still sounds good. It sounds revitalized. It sounds better than what they've been on the last, few releases. But still, this is a very interesting time for them to be recording a new live effort. So, I don't really see the significance. Maybe it's because Razor's Edge turned out to be their comeback album. I don't know. I'm just not really seeing it. But then again, the timing is a little off, but the songs do sound, for the most part, similar to their counterparts, with the exception of, say, Back in Black and Heat Seeker, Who Made Who, and of course the Bon Scott era songs. Stuff like Thunderstruck and You Shook Me All Night Long sounds pretty decent. Not like on the album per se, but, and then For Those About to Rock sounds alright, I suppose. Money Talk sounds pretty similar to the studio release of it. Of course, everything on the Razor's Edge is going to sound right. So, basically, with this album, you have 14 songs, which I'm going to get into in a little bit, and all of them sound really unique, especially the Jack, where there's live lyrics and then there's the studio lyrics. Bon Scott has sang the live lyrics before we saw it on If You Want Blood, You've Got It, but I don't believe we've ever really heard Brian Johnson sing it, at least not to my knowledge. So the album kicks off with Thunderstruck. Either way, on the double or single disc, you're going to get Thunderstruck, and this is very interesting because it's played a little bit faster and it's a little bit more blended together than the studio release. It sounds a little bit less heavy, I suppose, and a little bit more well produced. I do like the live version, maybe a little bit better, but I'm not even sure. I like the heaviness aspect of the original, but I do like how they blend everything together in the live version. Shoot to Thrill, this is one where I didn't really dig it that much because it doesn't really sound like the studio release. Brian Johnson's vocals aren't suited for this song at this point in time, and probably never will be again, although his vocals are getting a lot better as seen on Play Ball and Rock or Bust, the new tracks that were just released not so long ago. And yes, I do know about them, I just have been too busy to cover them. So, we will get to it when the discography allows us, or at least when the album is released, hopefully. So, next is Back in Black, and much like Shoot to Thrill, Brian Johnson's vocals aren't exactly suited for it, but in this one the guitars sound very, very good, especially in a, you know, I don't really know what to call it, like a bridge, a verse, a gap, something like that. The guitars sound really good, very heavy, very well produced. The guitars, they use the same setting as they did on the Razor's Edge album, which is, you know, a very heavy, kind of distorted, echoey kind of sound, kind of like, you know, like very metal-ish, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. They play hard rock in a metal fashion, albeit not as metal as For Those About to Rock, We Salute You, but it still sounds very metal nonetheless. So the guitar production is just epic and out of this world on this album. It fits pretty much every song, I'll give it that much. Even Shoot to Thrill sounded pretty awesome on the guitars now that I think about it. And the drums are just ferocious and aggressive. Chris Slade has this drumming technique that is just out of this world. I don't know, he added something to ACDC that was very different, very aggressive, and just had a lot of flair to it. So I do give him props for that. He did do a good job at what he did, but in the end, of course, they had to go with Phil Rudd because of his tenure with AC/DC during their prime years. So, basically, Who Made Who, this one sounds almost better, actually, than the studio counterpart. Same with Heat Seeker, just because the albums were a little bit lackluster with their original material in the case of Who Made Who, and the album in general, when in the case of Heat Seeker. Blow Up Your Video, you guys know my opinion on that. If you don't, check out the video. It's kind of a bad album. It's not a terrible album, but it's a bad album. Heat Seeker was one of the best songs off of there, but that's not really saying much. There's too much reverb on that album, but you know what? Go watch the video if you want to know my opinion on it. This version sounds almost better because of course, Brian Johnson's vocals have matured since this point in time. So the next song is The Jack, and this is a very bluesy song, much like on If You Want Blood, You've Got It. He uses the same vocal style, the same lyrical structure, and it sounds pretty damn good, especially with Brian Johnson's vocals. And the guitars and drums don't really make much of a difference here, as it is kind of a slow, bluesy, kind of simplistic progressive song. Not progressive. Progression. Simplistic progression. That's what I meant to say. So, it is a simplistic song. So, Money Talks, like I said, it sounds a little bit heavier, but a little bit more well blended. I do like the studio version a little bit better than this version, but this version on here does sound a lot better blended. It sounds a little bit more melodic, and the production is just right on it. So it sounds almost exactly like the studio version, with the exception of the backing vocals singing Money Talks in the background, or saying Money Talks during the chorus. So It sounds a little bit better with the backing vocals, which they excluded from this version, or at least they're barely audible from this version. So then again, you know, I do like this, you know, the live version as well, but I do like the studio version a little bit better. The guitars are pretty good, production as well, so drumming, everything. Hell's Bells, this is another one where it sounds pretty good, with the exception of course, Brian Johnson's vocals kind of fading a little bit during this period of time. Not exactly going back to Back in Black that well. He can't really go back to the material, as I stated in the past. But the guitars, oh my god, the guitars on this song, the adrenaline, and just the pure intensity of it all just takes it away. The next song, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, the guitars really do this song justice, as well as the drums. Everything is just really intense and very aggressive, much like on track number 13, TNT. For a while, this was my favorite version of TNT. I fucking love the aggression. I love how fast it is. I love how just heavy it is. I love the lyric style. I like the vocal style, especially in this song. It fits. And Brian Johnson really does a good job of making it his own. So let's back up a little bit, go to Whole Lotta Rosie. They play this song with so much speed, it's fucking insane. I can't believe how fast they were playing it, especially when I first heard it. I'm just like, what? It blew me away. Of course, I like the If You Want Blood, You've Got It version a lot better, just because of Bon Scott's vocals and just the production, and, you know, it was in their prime, so what can I say? But this version still kicks some serious ass. The next song, You Shook Me All Night Long. This is kind of a dud. I mean, I love the original, don't get me wrong, I love the original. I don't like the live version for some reason. It just didn't really click with me. Highway to Hell, the guitars and drums on this album really do this song justice, especially with how heavy it is and the production overall of the album itself. So I really like it. The vocals could be a little bit more improved, but they do actually fit kind of well with this song. So, you know, it is what it is, I suppose. The time period that this album was recorded will have no bearing, I repeat, no bearing on my score whatsoever. The next song, TNT, we already talked about it. For Those About to Rock, We Salute You. This is a pretty decent one. I mean, they play the outro very, very, very fast after the cannons go off with the 21-gun salute. And it's really awesome. This is the first version of the song that I heard. And, you know, the studio version blew me away, but this version blew me away too. I mean, the studio version is obviously superior in my opinion. But this version does have its own charms. So it's a great way to close it off and into the next studio album, Ball Breaker. But before we get into Ball Breaker, I do want to voice my opinions on what is, in my opinion, ACDC's last true classic song, Big Gun. Now, why do I say this? Because it's unreleased. They released it on iTunes, or it was unreleased. They released it on the soundtrack for Last Action Hero. If you haven't seen it yet, I don't know, I haven't seen it either, but listen to the song. So it's an awesome song. It's got an awesome chord progression. Brian Johnson's vocals fit it absolutely perfectly. I don't know if Phil Rudd was on here yet, but I believe it was Chris Slade. I'm just going to go with the fact that it was Chris Slade. But this single kicks some serious ass. It's got some awesome chord progression. It's got an awesome sound to it. It's very heavy. It uses a different distortion technique and a different amp setting than Razor's Edge and Live did. But then again, I digress. It's an awesome song. Check it out if you haven't already. So overall, I'm going to rate Live probably 8.5 out of 10. I absolutely like it a lot. It's not amazing by any means, but it's a pretty damn good release. It's a lot better. It's better than Live at River Plate. I'll give it that much. So overall, I'm gonna give it an 8.5 out of 10. I'm gonna give Big Gun a 9 out of 10 for the single, because it's an awesome song. So with that, thank you very much for watching. This is Midnight Strike 3625. Keep calm and rock on.